Welcome back to the Writers Co-op, a business podcast for freelance writers everywhere. We are your co-hosts. This is Wudan.
And I'm Jenny.
We are almost done with the season. It's very hard to believe it.
It really is. Time flies.
So, Jenny, what are we talking about this week?
This week, we're going to talk about getting out of the office. So taking vacations, spending half days in the woods, which is what we love to do, or wherever else you go to decompress, and also maybe not working evenings and weekends unless you want to.
Woo! Okay, this is a goodie. But before we get started, we have a plug. So many of our listeners ask us questions about the craft of writing, which we are devastated to say that we don't really address on the show. But for more craft talk and interviews with some of the best in this business, you all should listen to the Longform podcast if you don't already. It's hosted by Evan Ratliff, Max Linsky, and Aaron Lammer. They've recently had on Cheryl Strayed, photojournalist Phil Montgomery, and freelancer Eva Holland. There are lots of interesting conversations on there about reporting, writing, interviewing, finding characters, and more.
Honestly, this is one of the first podcasts I listened to when I became a freelance writer, so I always walk away from the episodes feeling really inspired. We definitely recommend checking them out.
Yeah, lots of inspiration for me as well. Recently, Lulu Miller was interviewed on the Longform podcast, and she talked all about burnout, balancing work and life when you can't really turn your job off, and that existential doubt of like, what am I doing, that often comes along with being a writer. And I think that coincides really well with today's topic.
So initially we considered calling this episode Work-Life Balance Hacks, but I have to say that phrase work-life balance sometimes rubs me the wrong way because this whole effort to have a big life outside of work for me is really an ebb and flow. It's never actually a perfect balance. Like sometimes I have a really busy, terrible week, and then the next week might be really good, where I spend a lot of time doing things that aren't work. So I'm never really in the middle of that balanced pendulum for more than like maybe half a day. So I really think it's the big picture that matters to me more than finding that perfect balance all the time.
You also might be thinking, this is a business podcast. What's avoiding burnout and taking time off got to do with running a business? Well, we are here to say that finding ways to do less work allows you to be more productive on days and moments that you are working. Stepping away from the work can give you more clarity on how you want to run your business. It's kind of like when you get a real job, you have vacation days.
Yeah, I love talking about this. I'm actually a huge advocate. Like, I think if I could pick one topic to evangelize for freelancers, it would be ways to focus on life beyond work. But to start our whole conversation about this, I think I want to talk about why burnout is such a problem for freelancers and especially for freelance writers.
Agreed. Per usual, let's start with story time. Jenny, tell me about a time when you were burnt out from work and what you did about it.
This is actually the story of my freelance career. In 2015, I was coming off of a media job where I was that person, like the person everyone could go to get answers. And I made myself indispensable, voluntarily took on the work of probably 2 or 3 people and spent honestly, probably 10 to 12 hours a day working remotely on a laptop. It was my first media job, and I really wanted people to know that I was there to work. I wanted to prove myself. I wanted to be the last person that they'd consider laying off, and thus I worked. And I worked, and I worked, and I worked, and I worked, and I went to yoga, and then otherwise I just basically worked and got a puppy. That's what I did. You know, it paid off in that I got a promotion really quickly, but the promotion made things even more stressful for me. I was managing a team of people who lived on both coasts. So essentially I was online at all hours of the day. I was covering politics and progressivism during the last election. And eventually my body started to actually break down. Like my eyes would twitch. I developed chronic shoulder and back pain. My anxiety, which I usually deal with anxiety, but it was sky high all the time and I couldn't sleep. So after another year of living with that, I straight up quit because I burnt out. I had no work plans ahead of me. And this was the first time I tried freelancing. I think it took me 3 to 4 months to come down off of that high of being burnt out and constantly going. I couldn't relax. Like I was always on my phone. And I think that pretty much everything about my life now and the way I've designed my business is built to combat that type of situation from happening to me again because it was really unhealthy.
That is so hard. I also want to say, like, when you're greener and you feel like you have more to prove, like showing that you are indispensable, that can help you get things as a freelancer, get gigs as a freelancer in the future. So that kind of pays off. But it is super easy to wear yourself out fast. I'm really glad you've learned from that.
Totally. Sometimes I have these little moments now where I feel just an inkling of the same way as I used to feel. Like I can feel the burnout approaching and I'm like, no, stop. Like I think I'm better at seeing it, a mile away now versus it would be on top of me previously before I'd really know that things were going poorly. So I want to hear about you. Tell me about burnout for you. Like what's your relationship with it? And have you had any bad burnout periods or episodes recently?
Well, I was a sprinter when I was on the high school track team, which basically tells anyone everything you need to know about me. Like I'll go really hard for short spurts of time. I had a really bad bout of burnout starting in mid-March for about an entire month. That was around the time when I had an international trip that was planned and then was canceled because of coronavirus.
We're still recording this during pandemic times, by the way.
Yeah, unfortunately. Anyway, I had to basically make up for a lot of lost income. So I panic hustled and I managed to get lots of assignments really fast. And the more I said yes to, the more seemed to come my way. And I took them all because the media industry was collapsing and I needed work. I did not even have time to manage my master spreadsheet at the time and see how much work I was taking on. So I didn't have a good sense of when to stop. And I think I knew 2 weeks into that I was burning out, but I still had 2 weeks of nonstop deadlines left. So the last 2 weeks were super hard. I think I'm in the middle of a burnout thing right now. So this is fun. I mean, I've been working really hard. My brain kind of short circuits. I find myself really putting off writing, putting off that hard work of synthesizing information and feeling like I just could spend my entire day on Twitter and email, which is not good. So my relationship to burnout is that it comes and goes. I am very self-aware of when it creeps in the ways that I explain. Less excited to get to work. Writing feels like a drag. I get bored of the process, and that's all pretty unusual for me. Before coronavirus, I feel like I had a pretty good handle on avoiding burnout because I was in this flow with larger projects, but with Corona, it's a really hard, challenging balance with many more shorter term assignments because how am I supposed to plan for anything anymore? So it's a learning process.
Yeah, I've heard this from a lot of freelancers about this particular period of time that things seem to be less steady over the long term and more short sprints of a ton of work and then periods of no work. So I don't think you're alone in feeling that. And I do think burnout is a huge issue for most writers and journalists, and maybe even more so for freelancers. For so many of us, our work is on our laptops and on our phones. Like it is always available. We're often working from home. And so, my husband's a nurse. He works when he's at the hospital, and when he's home, he doesn't work. We don't get to do that. We don't get to leave our work behind. It's always here. And I think without strict boundaries, work, it never stops. You never get to turn off. You don't have mandated vacations. It can get really bad, honestly.
I agree. I also think burnout is maybe one of the most under-discussed but most important issues freelancers face. Because if we burn out too hard, we can't work, like how my brain is functioning or not right now. And we have to work if we want to make money.
We wanted to bring in someone else to chat with us this week about burnout. And Alex Leviton seemed like a perfect fit. She's worked as a journalist, an editorial director, a startup co-founder, and a travel writer. She teaches writing classes. She just published a book about how to access your creativity, which we'll link to in the show notes. And she's been doing all this work for several decades in the midst of major personal crises, moves, traveling the world. So she has some cool thoughts about burnout. Here is my conversation with her. All right, Alex, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
So as you know, today we are talking about burnout. And as someone with a long history of working as a writer and a freelancer and an editor, I would love to hear about your relationship to career burnout.
I had a pretty big burnout session. I think it's about maybe 2009. I was working 8 different freelance gigs at one time, and one of them was part-time in an office, and I was renting out my place 3,000 miles away. So I was a landlord, and it was a pretty tough time. So I went through burnout, which was probably the best thing that ever happened to me in my life.
Tell me why it was good.
Yeah, I'm sure that's a question that I will get a lot. And you know a little bit about the methodology that I teach, but just very quickly, I put a lot of things when I teach creativity on this spectrum that goes from 10 to -10. And so I call anything below a 0 triage. And that's when you're kind of underwater and struggling. I think burnout is so different for everybody. A lot of people start, if you've got babies at home or you're working 8 jobs, then, you might be starting in a -5. And so any quote unquote advice I give, it has to be taken with a grain of salt of where you are on that scale yourself. But I was working so much, and I was doing several volunteer gigs on top of this and a lot of difficult things in my life. And I got a health issue. I was doing a Lonely Planet book, and at one point, I literally was just so physically exhausted on the road. I was in Italian hill towns and going up and down and carrying really heavy things. And I'm not a large woman. And it was just so physically difficult. I just sat down and just started crying. I physically could not move. And then I ended up dealing with some health issues and getting a diagnosis. And I was lucky enough to get a 3-month medical leave of absence because of the diagnosis. And that was the most amazing time. And as a freelancer, you don't want to drop out of your career. So much of it is momentum. I think I worked an average of 360 to 363 days a year for about 10 years. And so to know that I got to that point where I was a -9, it was not a good thing. I had to stop for 3 months.
Yeah, let's talk about that freelancer bit because, I think when we are addressing burnout, like this is a particular issue that is, I think, a big problem for freelancers, maybe especially freelance writers. So do you have any thoughts on why this is particularly an issue? You mentioned that we, feel like we don't want to stop working. We don't want to press pause. It's all about momentum. But what else? Are there any other reasons that this particular group may be prone to burnout?
Absolutely. I think part of it for writers, storytellers, poets, journalists, anybody that wants to look at the human condition and report back on the human condition to other people, we really need to feel ourselves the full range of the human condition. We're researching. Jon Stewart talked about this when he quit The Daily Show. As storytellers, we need to research the full range of the human condition, and we need to look at the absolute worst of society. And, especially for people who are fiction writers and poets, and then freelance writers and journalists, either we're experiencing it ourselves through emotions or we're seeing it in society and reporting back on it. And that's part of our job. And, if we kind of lived in that, on that scale, if we lived in the 2 through the 4, who would want to read an article or who would want to read a poem from somebody who never went above a 4, never went below a 2? We need to be able to be storytellers and writers. We need to have the full range of human experience to be able to write and report about it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. These episodes live forever, but I think this is a particularly interesting time to be talking about burnout as, a writer, a journalist with the state of the world. Do you have any thoughts on kind of, this particular moment and why that, that being plugged into the human condition can be a recipe for burnout?
I think, what we're witnessing now is 400 years of pain and 100 years since the last pandemic, and all of this is on top of a presidency that's already quite rife with this amazing amount of strife. And all of this is on top of, I think, about 30-40 years of we almost have this addiction to stress right now. And so we're piling all this one on top of the other on top of the other. And I think especially for people within communities of color that have been going through this for hundreds of years, we're at this reckoning, this enormous reckoning. And writers are on the front lines of this. And you saw, here in Seattle, and I think in several cities, several writers, several journalists have lost their eyes. And I mean, this is a time of reckoning, and this is the changes that are going to come out of this are amazing. But I think some writers have talked about this, but we also do need to take care of ourselves too, to be able to be there and to be able to witness that -9 through +9 work and world. We need to be able to take care of ourselves.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Tell me about your tactics for preventing burnout or taking care of yourself, that you've developed over the years so that you don't find yourself sitting on a path in Italy, totally with nothing left to give.
I think those 3 months, I had to get to my -9 to be able to do this. And those 3 months were, in a way, three of the best months of my life. It was a medical leave of absence. And so I was so privileged to be able to know that I had a little bit of money coming in, that I was going to be able to go back to a job. I think that's what's so hard for freelancers. I never could take that time. For 12 straight years, I couldn't take that time because I knew I had to stay on the path. And so I learned all these tips during that time. So what I hope I can do is, for people who don't have those 3 months, I hope I can take my experience and give them some of those tips.
Yeah, absolutely.
Don't ever try to give yourself tips while you're in burnout. Take time. I mean, even if it's now, take one day off and write in your journal and come up with lists, checklists, rules. What has made you not have burnout in the past? What's ever helped you? When you've gotten to your -3, -5, -9 place, what were some of the things that told you were going there? What are some of the things you could look out for next? Put 10 pages aside in a journal and a notebook and write as many lists as you can. One list. How do you know you're going down? Another list. What's helped you when you were there? Another list. What helps you stay at the +5s, the +7s, the +9s? What helps you get up there?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Tell me about, for you, what some of those prevention or assistance tactics are. Like, if you see burnout coming, what do you do now?
So I absolutely love being a -1, -2 because I get so much good stuff. It's when I get to the -3 that I really have to stop myself. And so what I've done is I've written list after list after list that helps me realize when I'm getting to that point. And so I'll know when I get overwhelmed, when I get irritable, that's when I need to stop. Like I love getting a little angry. I love feeling a little bit of pressure because that helps me bounce up. But it's when that pressure goes too far. So it's a really fine line. And so I've written lists. How can I tell that fine line? So wanting to back away. I used to be a huge raging introvert. I'm much more introverted now. And that helps me tremendously. And that came out of that 3 months of burnout.
What else do you do if you see yourself approaching that -3? What, do you take on less work? Do you take days off? What does that look like?
And you said this before to me, is just noticing. It's just noticing. The biggest quote unquote thing I can do is just notice when I've gotten to that -3. And then my brain will kind of start kicking in. And this is why I got to burnout, is I didn't realize that all of these things were happening. I had that same stress addiction. Oh, you worked 60 hours last week. I worked 80. I worked a 30-hour day. Oh, well, I worked a 34-hour day. It was almost that our society kind of got addicted to stress. And I absolutely was in there as much as anybody else. And so the biggest thing I can do isn't even a thing. It's a 1-second thought.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. It's just the actual seeing before you get too far. Do you have any rules for yourself in terms of, not working 36 hours a day? Do you have any sort of boundaries that you've set around your schedule or your career that help you avoid pushing too hard or getting addicted to stress in that way?
You probably didn't mean this literally, but I literally have rules. So I have them written down and I have a series of maybe 18 different rules.
Yeah, I actually did mean rules because I have them too. So I love hearing about this. So yeah, tell me.
When I get a freelance assignment, my brain wants to just kind of spiral down and say, oh God, this is going to be so much. And so I have about 6 rules. And so, and they're kind of somewhere between statements and rules. But one of them is, when I get an assignment, I will feel overwhelmed. And so one of my rules is, okay, I will feel overwhelmed. Great. And I'll just give myself that half hour, an hour to feel like, oh my God, I'm never going to be able to do this. Go research first. Do as much before you even think about how overwhelming this could be. Do research. Write a list. What do I need to do? Write an outline and then sleep on it for a day. And so instead of, I know that I'll do that spiral and go down to the -3s and the -4s. And so I'll check in with myself. Yes, I'm going to feel overwhelmed. Yes, I'm going to feel pressure. Okay. And Jill Bolte Taylor, who wrote My Stroke of Insight, she's got a TED Talk about it as well. She talks about how, you've got 90 seconds where your body can't stop feeling a negative emotion. And so I'll give myself that. It's at least 90 seconds, but it's usually a little more than that. And I'll say like, okay, great. And I can almost watch myself from the outside say, okay, there's my emotion going into stress and pressure and freaking out. Great. Love it. Okay. Once I'm over it, then I'll go on to the next step.
Yeah, I love this. It's all kind of emotional processing and identification, which I think, I'm a trained yoga teacher. So these things you learn in yoga, but I use them so much in my freelance career too. I think the ability to see emotions as passing, passing clouds is really helpful. So last question for you. What would you say to that burnout self, however many years ago, sitting on the side of that path? Like, what would you say to her that you know now?
Oh, good question. You needed this. You needed to get to your -9 to know that you never had to go below a -3 or 4. I mean, I'll still dip down there once in a while, but unfortunately, the way that society almost idolizes stress, and we have this almost, and it is literally a physical addiction to stress. We get dopamine hits and we get these rushes of adrenaline and noradrenaline from stress. So I think I absolutely had that, and I think all of society does. I mean, it's strange, if we don't have that, people think, what's wrong with you as a freelancer? Why aren't you doing 5,000 things? And so I would say, I think you needed this, and know that feeling, know what the feeling feels like to be a -9, so that you don't have to go back here. And so you understand, and you could literally teach other people what their -9s might feel, because all of our -9s are going to be different.
Yep, I love it. Okay, Alex, thank you so much for your time. We'll talk to you later.
Love it. Thank you so much. Good luck.
Talking to Alex really made me think about the emotional work of writing for an audience and how that can be really exhausting. Like, you're on a stage as a writer, you're getting feedback from all sides, and you're still required to work in the middle of crises like the ones that we're in right now. In fact, you're often the one processing these crises for other people to understand. So I was thinking about this, and I remembered that the World Health Organization actually decided to include burnout in its list of occupational phenomena last year. So I looked it up, and they have actually a symptomology list of what happens when you're burnt out, and it includes feelings of energy depletion or exhaustion, mentally distancing yourself from your job, feeling negative about your job, and reduced efficiency. And when I read that, I was like, yep, and yep, that is 100% freelancing on a bad day or during a too busy time. And it's definitely like journalism defined, especially during a crisis.
Yeah, I was nodding my head to all of those symptoms. I think I'm officially clinically burned out. Thanks, WHO.
Yeah, I think, with the protests and everything that's going on, it's no wonder. The emotional labor of this is very intense. So let's talk about solutions, though. Alex had some great ideas, but Wudan, I want to hear about how you typically combat burnout when it creeps in.
I make it a rule to walk outside without my phone for an hour every single day. And that's about as much time as I spend walking my dog, because she's a handful. She needs a lot of exercise. I actually really enjoy being out with her and paying attention to her and the squirrels and not looking at my screen. I offer this as my easiest, cheapest, go-to anti-burnout strategy. I think, when I'm burned out, when I say I'm burnt out from my work, it's not the work that gets me burnt out. I think it is the being on all the time, looking at my email on a screen, looking at my Twitter DMs on my phone. So anything that gives me a break from a screen is awesome. What about you, Jenny?
I agree with that. For me, the most effective burnout strategies are definitely small daily things. I actually have a note on my bulletin board in front of my desk that says, I do not work evenings and weekends. I do not eat lunch at my desk. I get up to move every hour. I am not the person who knows everything. Like, literally, I have a card that says that. I think I wrote it after I quit that job I was very burnt out at, but I am not always effective at executing on those rules, but I do try every day. I especially try to not eat lunch at my desk and to move my body often. That really helps me get away from the screens. And I actually try to keep my working hours set too, which I think is another good first step for all of us, thinking about how you want your week to look and maybe setting actual in-office hours as a freelancer so you are not available for work all the time.
Yeah, I've seen people put this in their email signature.
Totally. Do you have set work hours, Wudan?
Vaguely, yes. I used to work 7:30 to 3:30 in the afternoon with a long break in between, usually around like 11 a.m. to 12:30. And after 3:30, I go get some exercise in. Now my work hours are more 8 to 4 p.m. with some exceptions. Sometimes I'll have to work weekends, or sometimes I'm so overwhelmed that the best time for me to do work is like after dinner, but I can go for a midday hike or something. Anyway, what about you?
Yeah, my hours are Monday through Thursday, 10 to 4 Pacific time. And I do some work outside of those hours. Like oftentimes I'm not completely done with what I need to do, but that's when I'm available to clients and editors for calls and emails. That's when I have actual reliable childcare coverage. So I can reliably promise that I can, chat with you without a baby screaming and with my brain actually focused. So outside of that, I am just not available to people. And I tell clients these hours constantly, like over and over again. When I send in an assignment, I say, for edits, this is when I'm available. And then I remind my editors that a lot. And they're usually pretty respectful. But that brings up another issue, I think, which is vacation. Americans are notoriously bad at taking vacation. And I think freelancers are probably even worse than the average American. So do you set like actual vacation time on your calendar, Wudan? And like how much vacation are you actually taking on a yearly basis?
I think my goal for last year was something insanely stupid, like 52 vacation days, one vacation day per week of the year. And this is not including the weekends, which I also try to take off. I think I ultimately got to 40. Which is not insignificant. My partner and I usually go on vacation for 2 weeks or so every year, and then I take lots of random weekdays off. But at this point, like, when is my next vacation? Because what the heck are plans?
Yeah, totally. I do think 40 days is actually pretty good. I talked to a freelancer a couple weeks ago who had not taken a vacation in 2 years. So 40 days is good. Did you go anywhere fun during those vacation weeks last year? I always like to hear people's adventure stories.
Yeah, we snuck in one last vacation before coronavirus really started screwing up travel plans, and that was to Grand Staircase National Monument in Utah. Last year, after a month-long project in Myanmar, I took about a week off in Thailand. I saw friends, I sprawled out on a beach, I went diving. It was really necessary after an intense month of being on assignment. Jenni, tell us, do you have a vacation policy?
Yes, I do. My business provides me with a very good vacation policy. So this year is obviously a little bit different because COVID. I love to travel, and that's not going to happen as much for the foreseeable future. And I did just take 3 whole months off for maternity leave. So this year is just going to be weird. But during the first 2 years of my business, I took 1 week off every quarter at least. I would set an out of office responder for those weeks that said, "Hi, I'm out of office right now. I typically take 1 week off per quarter to realign with my business priorities. That's this week. I'll plan to get back to you." And people were pretty good about it. Like, I actually was worried that they were going to be mad. Like, I can't get back to you for a week. Is that going to mean you never want to work with me again? But like I said, I do a lot of extra work to communicate my schedule to my clients ahead of time. And that way I'm there if they need edits. And if they haven't gotten me edits in time, they knew that they needed to get these things to me before I left. And it turns out that my clients also think it's kind of cool that I take this time off. Like, I always get emails responding to that autoresponder being like, "Oh my God, you're living the dream. How do I do this?" Like, they're jealous. So I think it's my personal mission to educate people on the benefits of vacation through my autoresponder.
That's awesome. I do something similar. Like, if I'm traveling on assignment or on vacation, I'll tell editors, and I think sometimes they get those emails too frequently, but they always become curious about where I'm going. So yeah, that jealousy part resonates with me as well. Jenni, tell me about the best vacation you took as a freelancer.
Yes. So, there are a few, but 6 months after I started my business, I saw this Groupon for a very severely discounted hotel stay in Bermuda, this like very ritzy hotel. And I talked to my husband and all of a sudden realized, like, wow, after an entire career of having to ask for vacation time, I could literally just go to Bermuda for a week. So we went. And we had such a good time. I turned off my phone for the whole trip and I didn't take my laptop. And I'd been working really, really hard up to that point. I was launching my business. I was trying to say yes to a lot of the work that was coming in to make new connections. And I have this memory of sitting on the deck that was attached to our room and thinking, like, oh my God, I can finally take a deep breath. The constant driving pace of freelancing rarely allows for that, I don't think. It was super dreamy and also very clarifying for where I wanted to take my business. After that point, we also did a week-long trip in a camper van last year along the Oregon coast, and man, that was like one of the best trips. Daily hiking, no internet connection. It was fantastic. But I think maybe it makes sense to circle back to that bit about getting clarity from being away. So, Wudan, tell me about taking vacation as a business strategy, because I think a lot of people will say to me, like, I can't take time off if I want to hit my financial goals. Like, I need to keep working. So do you see time traveling or like time on vacation as a money sink for your business, or is it beneficial?
So this goes back to your business plan and deciding how much money you want to make. Listeners can reference episode 2 if they want to go back and figure that out. And I honestly put in how much I would spend on a reasonable 2-week vacation in there. Like, that's just built in. And so when I have to go back and determine how much money I'm going to make a month, like, I am already accounting for my vacation, which is not going to be paid, right? But like, in a way, I am paying it because in advance or afterwards, but I'm hoping everything will net out. So I think that's important because, like I said, with any other job, you get vacation days. So it makes sense to build that in for yourself. For me, that means, either I expect money to come in while I'm on vacation. Sometimes I'm taking more work on before vacation, so I won't be stressed. It kind of depends on where my bank account honestly is.
Yeah, I agree. Like I said, I usually come back from vacation also feeling really refreshed, and I think I'm more efficient after the fact. Like, that trip to Bermuda, I had so much energy when I came back, and I found that when I sit in the grind week after week, like, I'm definitely less efficient overall, which, tracks with that WHO definition of burnout, like lack of efficiency. I honestly always think about how at my first media job, we had unlimited vacation and no one took any vacation because no one was telling you to take vacation. And I think that's how it feels to be a freelancer. Like, you have unlimited vacation, but no one's going to tell you to do it. So it's actually quite difficult to plan it for yourself, and you have to hold yourself accountable to actually take like legitimate vacation time. So we are going to include a couple things in the learning portal this week that I think will help. The first is a short worksheet to help you think through your vacation policy, like what is your business's vacation policy? And also we want you to think through your weekly work hours. So how much do you want to work every day and what would your ideal schedule look like? And then we will also include a template for an out of office responder that you can copy and paste.
That's funny to hear about unlimited vacation because my partner technically has unlimited vacation, but he's so bad at taking it. So I actually have to remind him. And in the end, all this comes back to is our own boundaries that we set for ourselves, right? In this case, with regards to vacation, figure out what you need and then say it out loud and then work towards that goal.
Agreed. I also really can't undersell the value of taking random days off midweek to go hiking. Yesterday, I left for a hike at 9 a.m., was back at noon, and the rest of my day was so productive, and I was in a much better mood.
That's really lovely. I've also been taking random afternoons off. I don't tell anyone. I just throw up my away message and the trails are emptier. It's a good thinking time to just breathe, get in the zone. Everyone is always jealous of my midday hikes. And I'm like, you can have this too. Come up with a business plan, come up with a schedule, give yourself boundaries, be militantly diligent about managing your time, and I promise it will happen.
Yeah, honestly, every time I'm out there midweek, I also feel like I'm getting away with something. It's just, I think it's the best way to remind myself that I have a lot more freedom doing this than I would have if I was working a desk job. It really helps me feel grateful for the freelance lifestyle. And I do think this comes back to values too, which is what we discussed during, I think it was our first episode. And we keep mentioning them, in like every episode. But it's all about, what do you care about? If you can do activities that align with what you care about, you're going to be a lot happier. And Wudan and I believe that building that into your business plan is going to be really helpful. So for me, that's movement, hiking, running, yoga, exercising, and getting outside. And when I do those things, my anxiety calms and I'm definitely better able to focus on the work at hand, especially synthesizing information and coming up with creative pitches. I do want to circle back to burnout a bit here though, and come back to the true value of taking a vacation or a day off. Wudan, how does taking time away specifically address your burnout?
My instinct is usually to run into the woods when I'm very burnt out. It is basically, I need to escape the horror that is my computer. And at a minimum, it reduces my stress.
Yeah, I've seen research actually and written about research about how time outdoors slows your brain down and sparks creativity. And it's, been shown to be huge with reducing anxiety and depression for a lot of people. I think I have found over time that going hiking is definitely one of my burnout meds. It's my anti-drug. And I actually even read a study last week about how vacation time measurably improves productivity. So that means, and I'm going to say this loudly, if you're taking a vacation, you're making a good business decision. If you're taking a vacation, you are making your business more efficient and increasing your own capacity for better work.
I 100% agree. I think the hardest part of this is saying no to an assignment, which we talked about 2 weeks ago, and saying yes to taking time off.
Yes, I have had a few times where I've gotten offered an assignment right before I was supposed to leave for a vacation, and it's so hard to say no. But if I had taken the assignment, I would have had to work during my vacation. So like Wudan said, we talked about this in our last episode, and I do think for me, there's some telltale signs where I'm okay, I need to step away from work. And that means I need to say no to this assignment. So early on, I did set myself an upper limit on the amount of work I could bring in. That sounds silly, but at first I just wanted to make the most money. And I would just keep taking on more and more work. This is my personality. I just want to do everything. And I have a lot of trouble turning my brain off. And so I needed a metric to tell myself, Jenni, you're done. You've done enough. It's time for you to take a break. And now I know that if I hit that certain income level every month, I'm done. I've hit the roof. I need to pause. I also can usually tell if I have more than 10 projects going on. I've also hit the roof. It's too much multitasking. It's permission to pause. But giving yourself permission to pause is super, super hard.
It's really hard. I'm definitely the same way of give me all the work. I can do it. This isn't that bad until it's really, really bad.
Yeah, it always hits this point where you're I should have known. I should have known.
Why did I do this? Yeah, it's bad. It's bad.
Wudan, do you plan your vacations in advance and put them on a calendar, or do you take them when you see time opening up in your schedule a few weeks ahead of time?
Yeah, this comes in two flavors. My partner and I usually have to deliberate pretty hard on vacation because before coronavirus, I traveled a lot for work. He traveled a lot for work. So we really had to plan that ahead, and I would just black it out in my calendar. Nothing else can go in it. For those random midday hikes, I usually look at my work matrix for an upcoming week.
Yeah, a copy of that is in the portal, by the way, too, I believe for episode 5, if you're a member, and that's super useful. Wudan uses this matrix in order to see how much work she has coming up.
If you haven't seen the matrix, it is a grid. There is nothing fancy about it. Matrix just makes it sound cool. But in it, I can list all my assignments. I look at every day to see how much work I have. I look at my physical Google Calendar to see when I have calls. And if I have a day that just looks super light, I'm going to shuffle things around on my to-do list. I can work slightly more in other days and, either take a full day off or a full afternoon off. Jenni, what about you?
Yeah, I plan mine in advance pretty much the same way. We put vacations on the calendar usually about a month or two in advance. But then also if I see that I'm going to have a slow day, I might decide it's worth it for me to work on a Saturday afternoon so that I can spend this Wednesday morning hiking. I like that you call them blackout dates, though. That's really helpful. Here's another issue that I struggle with. How do you prevent yourself from working when you're on vacation?
My really simple answer is that I don't bring my work laptop. Yes, I still have my phone, which is an iPhone. Yes, I am refreshing my email every morning and evening, but otherwise I'm enjoying my time. So I have my autoresponder on, and it basically says, I am not on email for anything urgent. I will try to get back to you as soon as possible. If something requires my immediate attention on vacation, I will reply real fast, but otherwise I just flag it. I think the function is starred on my Gmail, and that is the folder I go to once I'm back from vacation, and I just respond to everyone, and it takes an hour. Yes, the system really works. I almost never miss any emails, and I'm grateful I found this system for myself, really, because it makes me less stressed about having to be so reactive in the moment, but knowing that I've created a reliable system for myself. I don't miss any emails. there's no FOMO here. I can always just go back and get it once vacation is over. What about you?
This might be controversial, but I do not respond to any emails. I literally take my email app off of my phone.
Oh my God.
Because otherwise I will scroll through them, and I leave my laptop at home too. I do find that it actually takes me a day or two for my brain to slow down enough that I'm not constantly scrolling. And so that's why I do that. Probably halfway through the vacation, I'll sneak a peek and go through and delete the things I don't need to look at just so my first day back isn't hellish, but I don't respond to anything. So that offline time is really great for me, and I think my work is much improved when my technology is off. And I think my brain is very addicted to that technology, so the only way I can not look at it is to go cold turkey.
That's fascinating to hear about that extreme. I want to feel good enough about my life that I'm just going to delete my phone app. My email app, I mean. Well, I could just delete my entire phone too. I'm sure that will solve a lot of problems. What we really want to communicate in this episode, though, is that burnout is a real symptom of working as a freelancer, especially in media. And one of the best ways to combat it is to get out of your normal routine. Take a vacation or press the pause button on work.
Yeah, and we know firsthand it can be really tough to take time off, but as a freelancer, it can feel like you're constantly working. And so some of our tried and true methods that we've just talked about for actually implementing taking time off are putting vacations on your calendar as blackout dates in advance, setting vacation goals for how much you want to take each year, like figuring out what your company policy is on vacations, over communicating with editors about upcoming time off, and also setting an out of office message while you're gone so you don't feel responsible for responding to things.
On the line of boundaries, it could also be useful to set actual working hours for the week. Whatever works best for you is best for you. But yes, know your boundaries, write them on an index card, put them above your desk, whatever it takes.
Yeah, and we want to say that this is an ever-moving target too. Like, I rarely hit the perfect balance between my work and my life because those things really do blend together. Yeah, again, work-life balance doesn't seem to sum it up quite right for me.
Yeah, I am confessing that I am very bad at work-life balance this week that we're recording. So it's okay. The other thing I've had to learn for myself is giving myself permission to just not give off the image that I have work-life balance dialed, because sometimes I do and other times I absolutely do not.
Yeah, it's rarely perfect, but in however it looks, taking time for yourself matters, and taking time away from work, just like people in full-time jobs do, is really important.
Be a good manager to yourself.
Yes. Like I said, it's figuring out your benefits package for your business, your vacation policy, and I hope your policy is damn good.
All right. Well, it's that time again when we announce that we're heading back to work. We're almost done with season 1 of the podcast with just one episode left. That's about long-term career planning.
I'm really excited about that episode. And we are also planning a special episode only for our co-op members. You are all going to hear about our secret sauce that we think keeps both of our businesses successful. So if you're a $3 a month member, or if you're signed up for any of the other membership levels on Patreon, you get that episode in mid-July. And then we're going to take a break and start building season 2. We also just added a section to our website that includes a store where you can buy a lot of our resources a la carte. So whether that is recordings of webinars that we've done or some of these worksheets that we've mentioned, if you're not a co-op member, you still have access to those and can purchase those, and that's thewriterscooppod.com.
If you want to collaborate with us, or if you have things you'd like to hear about for season 2, please reach out. We love to hear from our listeners.
We really do. I hope you email us and tell us your vacation plans, even if they're COVID vacation plans. I want to hear about them.
Yes. Tell us about your wins. We love emails about, we listened to your podcast and implemented this and it worked. Those are the best.
Yeah, they really are. Okay, well, I will see you later on the internet, Wudan.
Bye, Jenny. Season 1 of the Writers Co-op is made possible by a grant from the National Association of Science Writers. The Writers Co-op is hosted by me, Wudan, Gan, and Jenny Gritters, and produced by Susan Fallon.